At first, it looked like a perfect job.
In 1898, in a small laboratory in Paris, two scientists were working with a dark mineral called pitchblende. Their names were Marie Curie and Pierre Curie. They were studying something unusual, materials that seemed to release energy on their own. During their experiments, they discovered a new element. They called it radium. What made radium different wasn't how it looked, it was what it did. Without heat, without light, it continuously released energy. At the time, this wasn't seen as dangerous, it was seen as a breakthrough. Radium quickly became one of the most fascinating substances in the world. Scientists studied it, newspapers wrote about it, and soon, businesses saw an opportunity. By the early 1900s, radium had moved beyond the laboratory. It started appearing in everyday products: toothpaste, face creams, even drinking tonics. People believed it could restore energy, improve health, even slow aging. There was very little regulation and even less understanding. But radium had one feature that made it especially valuable. On its own, it was invisible. But when mixed with certain materials, like zinc sulfide, its energy could be turned into light, a soft green glow that didn't need sunlight and didn't fade. That glow had a purpose. It made it possible to read instruments in the dark. So companies began using radium-based paint on watch dials and military equipment. Demand increased. Factories expanded, and by the 1910s, a new workforce was brought in: young women. One of the companies leading this industry was the United States Radium Corporation. To the workers, it seemed like a good job. Clean environment, light work, better pay than most factory jobs. And most importantly, they were told it was safe. Some were even told it could be beneficial. At that moment, no one truly understood what radium would do inside the human body. And by the time they did, the damage had already begun. By the late 1910s, the work had become strangely popular. For many young women, this was a good job. Clean environment, light work, better pay than most. Compared to other factories, it almost felt comfortable. At the United States Radium Factory, rows of young women sat side by side, painting tiny numbers onto watch dials. Carefully, slowly, precisely. The technique was simple: lip, dip, paint. Shape the brush with your lips, dip it into the paint, then paint, again and again and again. Some of them did this hundreds of times a day, and without realizing it, they were swallowing radium every single day. But at first, nothing felt wrong. In fact, the job felt almost magical. By the end of the day, their clothes were covered in dust, their hands, their hair, their skin, and in the dark, they glowed. The girls laughed about it. They played with it. Some painted their nails just to see them shine. Some brushed it onto their teeth before going out at night. Imagine that, walking into a dark room and your smile glows. People noticed them. They stood out. They looked different. They even had a nickname, the Ghost Girls. And to them, it felt beautiful, modern, almost futuristic. But there was something they didn't see. The scientists in the same factories handled radium very differently. Gloves, lead screens, tools, distance. They never touched it directly. But the girls were told something else. They were told it was safe. Some were even told it was good for them. And for a while, that was easy to believe because the first symptoms were small. A toothache, a little pain in the jaw, fatigue, nothing that felt connected to a glowing watch dial. But then, things started to change. And once they didn't stop.
At first, the company denied everything. Even as more workers became sick, teeth fell out, bones weakened. Some of the women developed a condition so severe, their jaws literally began to decay. Doctors were confused, families were terrified, and many of the girls were still in their 20s. Some of the workers decided to fight back. One of them was Grace Fryer. She had spent years painting watch dials before realizing the pain in her body wasn't temporary. Finding a lawyer willing to challenge a powerful corporation wasn't easy, but the women kept pushing. And after years of legal battles, the Radium Girls forced major companies to take responsibility. Their case became one of the earliest major victories for workers exposed to industrial toxins. It helped reshape workplace safety laws in the United States, and for the first time, many people began questioning whether new technologies were being tested before being understood. Most of the women never fully recovered. Many died slowly, and even after death, some of their bodies remained radioactive for years. More than a century later, their story is still being retold. In 2020, a film called Radium Girls was released. The movie starred Joey King as Bessie Cavallo, a character inspired by several real dial painters, including Grace Fryer. The film follows the workers as they slowly realize what is happening to them, while the company continues insisting the paint is safe. It focuses less on horror and more on something quieter: confusion, denial, and the terrifying realization that the people in charge might already know the truth. Their story also appeared in books and historical research for decades, because over time, the Radium Girls became more than a workplace tragedy. They became a warning, a reminder that history often repeats itself in familiar ways. A new technology appears. It feels exciting, modern, useful. People rush toward it long before they fully understand it. In the early 1900s, that technology was radium. Today, some people wonder if we're living through something similar again, not with glowing paint, but with systems we barely understand yet use every single day. Technologies moving faster than our ability to fully measure their long-term effects. 100 years ago, people believed radium was harmless, and many of them were completely certain. So here's the question: what are we calling safe today that future generations will look back on in disbelief? If you stayed until the end, thank you. And if stories like this interest you, consider subscribing, because history has a strange way of repeating itself.